Recently, I posted a video on Twitter that mocked the overpowered changes to the Boa Zon in the upcoming patch. Dbrunski, in his very unassuming and delicate way, said, "Solutions, bro. Let's see some solutions." I do have quite the tendency to complain more than I offer these things, so in this video, we're gonna get to it. We're gonna take a look at what is so broken about the Boa Zon in patch 2.4 for PvP, why it still sucks in PvE or PvM, as us old schoolers call it, and most importantly, take a game theory style look at a potential solution to both of these problems that is actually pretty insane. Like, I wanna see this build right now. Enough all this teasing, let's just dive in. I put together a pretty strong Boa Zon based on some previous builds that we've seen in the Blood More, some build videos that I've done. I'm just gonna breeze over the gear here real quickly. You'll see that a lot of this stuff is best in slot. I've actually built this one to be a hybrid Amazon, which is what most Amazon duelers are. But also, unlike what we can do in the PTR, I've put together some actual best in slot charms in the inventory. These are a mix of 3 2020s and 3 320s with 1 451 Poison Charm, Annie, and Hellfire Torch. We have a cube in here because we do cube bow. But once we get all battle ordered up, you can actually see here on the stat screen that Strafe and Guided Arrow do over 7.4k damage each. And then also Multi-Shot does 4.8k. And when you figure that Amazons in regular D2R will do about 5k damage, somewhere around there, give or take, the damage here is pretty insane. Especially when you figure that Strafe, Multi-Shot, Guided, all of these attacks here are already doing pretty vicious damage to players. This is already a very good build with those 3 attacks, and it just so happens that those are the ones that got some synergy boosts. So as you can see here, Multi-Shot gets damage from Guided Arrow gets damage from Multi-Shot, and then Strafe gets damage from Multi-Shot and Guided Arrow. As for the skill point distribution on this build right here, I've obviously maxed these skills just for the damage boost. Then I actually made this one as close as I could to the Poison Boa Zon build video that I did way back in the day. But a lot of our remaining points went into Poison Javelin and Plague, and that's really just because Amazons have a lot of skills left over. But if we were going for crit damage, we could put more points into Critical Strike, you could put more into Penetrate, you could put more into Dodge and Avoid and Evade. I put 3 each into these. Those are very, very useful skills in PvP as well. For the stats, we did just enough strength to wear the gear. We put enough in Vitality to have a little over 3k life with battle orders, and the rest went into Dexterity for more damage. I also took this build to some common farming areas just for proof of concept here on these changes. In Players 1, this build wrecks. On Players 8, it can struggle in areas where we would expect it to be a little better. Now, I believe that all builds should struggle in certain areas, but Cows seems like the place for this build, and it still barely holds a candle to other farming builds, even other Amazon builds like the Javazon. And with the entry cost to this build and the cost of all of this gear in order to get best in slot, it's unlikely that players will invest the resources into something like this for PvM, when other builds are not only cheaper, but also more effective with weaker gear. Alternatively, and in PvP, the Boa Zon has always been great. Physical damage resistance is capped at 50% in PvP, but even when players max this out, the damage from Guided Arrows, Multi-Shot, and yes, even Strafe is already crazy good. So the fact that all of these skills are being synergized to boost each other presents an obvious problem in the Blood More. We can't really test it to show off how powerful it really is in the PTR, as we're presented with issues right off the bat. One thing that would help test builds like this online is if we were given max damage AR life charms like the ones that I showed previously. Max AR lifer charms are great for Amazons, Zealots, Oridans, and Barbs. But to your credit, Blizzard, I understand that it is extremely difficult for any one person to know what makes all character classes tick, especially when we're considering PvM as it pertains to PvP. Listening to both ends of this argument surrounding the Boa Zon build is tough, and believe it or not, Blizzard has actually gotten a lot better about it through the years.
We are never going to allow, at least over my dead body, the PvP game to wag the tail on game balance. Whenever we run into a case of this would be really awesome for PvE. And then the PvP guy goes, that kind of screws PvP. The answer's always, shut up, PvP guy.
We all know what that attitude did for Diablo 3. Many people ask me, shouldn't we care more about the playthrough of the end game, whereas only a smaller amount of people do PvP? They need to balance PvM. I'm gonna say something that might actually surprise a lot of people. I completely agree with you. PvM is the most important part of D2. PvM should be smooth, it should be fun, and it should be empowering for players to find good gear. Without a smooth, meaningful playthrough of the game, no one will be around at the end of it for PvP. But the problem comes from when we approach balance changes through only the lens of PvP or only the lens of PvM. Believe it or not, we can actually learn a lot by listening to both camps of players and what their frustrations are. With this, we can learn exactly what might really be wrong with the Amazon. PvM players struggle with the damage output of the Boazon, and that is a valid concern. For years, the Boazon has paled in comparison to her Javazon counterpart, along with also paling in comparison to many other builds that farm endgame areas or even try to level to 99. With the Boazon in particular, some skills that have the potential to address multiple targets at once just seem underwhelming with their lack of diversified damage or area effect. PvP players struggle with build diversity with Boazons. Almost all Boazons in PvP are some sort of hybrid. This is because there's 3 skills worth putting any points into in the Boa skills tab: strafe, guided arrow, and multi-shot. There are no decisions to be made, no sacrifices to be had. And what some people are making for a point with the PTR changes is that is still the case. There's no sacrifice there. There's just a big payoff for a build that was already good. So what would actually solve this problem for this particular build? What is the right answer if not to bump up the synergies of these already used skills? There may not be an answer that will satisfy everyone, but there may be one that's actually dope as fuck. There may be a way to rethink the bow skill tree that is not only fun and engaging for PvM players, but that could also provide insane build diversity for Boazons in PvP. For example, consider this. What if the skills Cold Arrow and Fire Arrow added passive cold and fire damage respectively to all of your other arrow attacks? Think about that. Players could invest skill points into fire and cold arrow skills to gain benefits on their more usable attacks, such as guided or multi or strafe. These could be tweaked to add massive elemental damage at high levels. These would obviously have to be scaled properly, or PvP players would just put 1 point into them for vicious added damage. The payoff to this is it actually could encourage players to use Boa skill Grand Charms. Additionally, it could provide much needed build diversity and commitment on behalf of PvP players to create an entirely new Zon build in the Bloodmoor. I put together an Amazon and hero editor with charms that simulate an added 5 to 6k fire and cold damage. This was sort of my way of simulating these skills if that actually was the case and the amount of damage that they might potentially add. These Zons, while still having weaknesses, seem to do quite a bit better in the cow level and in Chaos Sanctuary. And this is on players 8. There's a lot to be gained from the Mercenary in this build as well. An Act 1 Mercenary could supplement physical damage or attack speed with the Faith Bow. An Act 2 Merc with Infinity could lower the fire and cold resistance of oncoming monsters, making them take even more damage. I didn't really change the gear up too much other than those charms, but there are actually a lot of options. For example, we could use the new Flickering Flame, or we could use Nightwing, or tons of other items that increase our fire or cold damage or decrease our enemy's fire or cold resistance. Additionally, for the skill tree, I only put 20 points into multi-shot and only 20 points into strafe. I tested this on patch 2.3, the current patch, without the added benefits of 2.4. I did put some other skills in dodge, avoid, and evade, and crit, and penetrate, the 1-point wonders that you might expect from a build like this. All of the rest of the points, nearly 60 of them, just sat there unused. I actually had a lot of fun with this, and this could actually become a slaughterhouse in PvM with the right gear. Believe it or not, it may actually be more balanced in PvP as well. Let's assume the added damage from Cold and Fire Arrow did 6k elemental damage each, to make it simple. With 75% resist in your typical Raven that you'll see on a lot of PvP builds, this actually only comes out to about 200 to 400 more damage in PvP, based on all of the calculations and all of the formulas. Now granted, that is a lot of damage, but it's not anything really to write home about the build, especially when we consider that this would require a more significant skill investment in the bow skills tree. This could be huge for both PvP and PvM. And who wouldn't want to walk through their favorite areas obliterating monsters with a BoA Zon using Infinity on the Merc? Who wouldn't want to see an entirely new build in the Blood Moor, some that could even utilize new rune words, just blistering opponents in unique ways? You could have physical BoA Zons, cold BoA Zons, fire BoA Zons, and even hybrids still. This is a change I could personally get behind, and one that might actually be more engaging for players in PvM and PvP than the changes that currently exist in patch 2.4 in the PTR.